Hallo, hello. Das ist zweisprachig. Ich versuche es zweisprachig. I tried bilingual. This is London. There we have still Friday, but I'm living in Germany and I'm recording from there. Also das hier ist London. Da haben wir noch Freitag, aber hier in Deutschland haben wir schon Sonnabend. And what I'm telling you is not new on this channel. It is something that is not on the big scale. It is not seen openly what I lived through. I could see some hints where I had been playing, for example, in a movie, a little character, but that is not openly, so it is not something you should be concerned about, except if you are interested in the real thing, in that what really had happened, not that what is smoothened and is made beautiful. Also wenn man jetzt nicht an dem interessiert ist, was jetzt schön gemacht ist und so, ja, dass es so heldenhaft und glorreich aussieht, also ohne die dazugehörigen Fehler, die das Leben auch mit sich bringt, dann ist das nichts. Aber wenn man so ähnlich denkt wie ich, dass man wirklich wissen will, was so passiert ist. Ich kann natürlich nicht zu viel erzählen, ich habe auch nicht sehr viel miterlebt. Ich hatte Seitenrollen, also Nebenrollen. Da könnte man mich sehen, aber da man da verkleidet ist häufig, kann man mich eben auch nicht erkennen. Also ich erkenne mich wieder. Das sind Rollen, wo ich nicht alles durchgängig gespielt habe. Es ist manchmal so, dass man da eine Gastrolle hat. Das sieht man im Film auch nicht. Ich kann hier natürlich jetzt nicht zu viel von den Hintergrundkulissen erklären, das geht auch nicht. Aber ich weiß auch gar nicht zu viel. This is the most important. And this is sponsored. I try this as a living. And of course you can look at for free. I do not want to make a business out of it. Also ich kann nur sagen, ich will da jetzt kein Geschäft ausmachen, kann ich auch nicht. Aber das hier muss gesponsert werden, sonst ist das nicht erfolgreich. Because I'm trying to look for the real, for the roots of that what was hidden, even for me. Also das, was auch sogar für mich verborgen worden ist, das sind die Wurzeln. I had, this is a paper, I had lived through the time, this now I have calculated was the birth year, and this is the first, officially it is 68, and I now go through many speculations or motives why this was hidden, maybe. Also das vielleicht, warum das verborgen worden ist, dieses wahre Geburtsjahr, das ist natürlich schwierig. Aber but it dawns, this really must have been the real year. And there's contradiction because the motives are not clear to others. They're not even trying to look into it as to the information I got from them. Also von anderen ist es so, dass sie nicht einmal, I must look if it is recording, I had trouble. The computer has a life of its own. Also der Computer hat irgendwie Eigenleben not into conspiracy theories. I think if that is something, it is practically happening and not in theory. Also ich bin jetzt kein Anhänger von Verschwörungstheorien. Wenn da wirklich irgendwie Leute interessiert sind, dann sind das gelangweilte Hacker oder ähnliches. Also hier, das erschließt sich anderen nicht ganz, warum das 67 gewesen sein könnte. It is of course difficult to understand. You're not that important. I had been a baby. I was a handful. I was that little. And why can't I remember that? Because after quite difficult times, that is not to complain about. Also es bringt nichts darüber zu klagen. Also es waren schwierige Zeiten. Und das war ziemlich lange. It had been a long time where I had to work my way through, and I had to do with people who were having troubles as well. Also ich habe mit Leuten gearbeitet, die auch Schwierigkeiten hatten, und deswegen will ich mich darüber gar nicht beklagen. It had been residence, also es war eine Altenpflege. And there to work at night. Und da hat man nach jemandem gesucht, der Dienste machte, und das ist dann das gewesen, was ich machen musste. There had been not an option to be sponsored by the family. Also die Option, bei der Familie unterhalten zu werden, die gab es nicht. And there had not been the chance to be sponsored by the state, because there was a gap. Also da ist man durch die Lücken gefallen, dass man eben auch kein BAföG bekam. There was then in between, also um das mal hier klar zu machen, also zwischendurch, interesting travels by really nice people. Also jetzt nicht jemand denkt, da gäbe es was. By really nice people, of course there had been a little bit dangerous situations, but I was raised in the first generation after the war that ended with a nuclear bomb in Japan. Also hier gab es natürlich gefährliche Situationen, aber ich finde die erste nach dem Krieg aufgewachsen ist, der mit einer Atombombe in Japan beendet worden ist. Deshalb gefährlich. I wouldn't go into those situations. Also ich will nicht in diese Situation. Nearly had dropped. I had been bored the window, at the very little he dropped. This was not in this city, this was somewhere else. And then there had been nearly dropping to Vaters, and maybe inherited. I heard the birds here. Be quiet, of course there is no tree. So I stopped someone else, and he was thinking I was trying to stop him without reason. Also hier waren wir dann zum Halt gekommen. Sonst wären wir da runtergeknallt. Also das sind so Situationen, this was somewhere in the jungle. Und das ist nicht zum Lachen, weil I was somehow immune against laughing, because I knew there was no reason. I had been on a short trip to an area we later discussed at school, and then I said to the teacher, there's not true what's written in the school book. Also, and then Also das, and that was at school maybe 10 years. And while I had those trips, my mother said I was raised in an interesting family and we all had trouble. I had made some photographs. This was my raising father, and you see he was in trouble. This was he in earlier days. Even there he was having trouble, and this was the aftermath of the war. And this is me. This name is my artist's name, so to speak. This father, he was, and he's still missing in combat. No, he wasn't. He was supposed to be in combat. I don't know if he had undergone some. He was drawn as someone in the Volkssturm in 45. But my mother, she wanted to have a child, and it was contracted with him. So I was born, but maybe with the tissues, other not by me regarded as siblings, because I think it was done without contract by the doctors themselves. Also da könnte illegal durch die Mediziner könnten auch andere entstanden sein, auch wenn der DNA ähnlich ist. Das sind nach meinem Dafür Vertrag nicht ist. End of the life on this earth, and that and I had think my race in this to it was the seniors residence. Das war anders als in dem Altenpflegeheim. Ich konnte mir das nicht erklären. Warum dieser Stress? Warum dieses Ganze? And why this? I put this gap there, but I deliberately stood a little bit aside. And I do not say this to complain, I say this to raise awareness with them and trying to gain understanding, because it was not in the open that we had an interesting past, and this came to us from the United States. Someone wanted to find out if we had to do with him, and I didn't know. That was interpreted as, no, I hadn't, but I did. Also ich hatte mit ihm zu tun. Das hier ist wahrscheinlich Reenactment, aber so hat er ausgesehen. Das war wahrscheinlich einer, wie man so sagt, Blutsbrüder. Aber sie sind ja nicht biologisch verwandt, aber ich kenne mich da auch nicht aus. Das ist wahrscheinlich Adoptionsbruderschaft, das kann ich nicht sagen. Vielleicht ist das sogar der Vater in diesem Stamm. And this is the place I'm working, and it looks like being a rich boy. But I had been in the retraining program, and this did not go well, because the labor market is not expecting someone in the average is 2 or 3 days a month on sick leave because of the preborn situation. I'm not sick, but I'm quite enduring. Also ich bin schon zäh, aber not healthy as well. Also auch nicht gesund, aber wer will schon jemanden haben, der 2-3 Tage im Monat durchschnittlich krank ist, und das ist über die Jahrzehnte so ungefähr. Also deswegen, das hier sieht aus wie ein, aber das habe ich mir in Sonderangeboten gekauft, und seltsamerweise sind da so viel Bugs drin, dass ich schon mal denke, Sonderamt, oder woran liegt das? Ist das bei jedem? Aber ich will ja mich nicht beklagen. Also wenn, dann hat ja jemand Langeweile, denn was will er bei mir holen? And now I understood there are so many secrets, even that is secretive. Sogar das kann man sich angucken. There had been sponsoring for my mom, my mommy. Also meine Mama ist die Tochter meiner Mutter. She could not, she was said it could be her death if she would carry me on. So she helped out, but it was not said she gave me birth, because I don't know if she had for part-time. And it was something my mother had earned herself. She was in the industrialization process of the Arabian world, where the big machinery was put on the market. Also da war die Mutter, war sie tätig, hier ist sie, da war sie tätig, das bin ich, als die Großgeräte eingeführt wurden, hat sie das Geld verdient. Und dann hatte hier, meine Mama hatte sie dann, sie ist eingetragen als Mutter, aber sie ist auch eingetragen als Mutter. Ich weiß nicht, wo it is secretive, because as a child you're not interested. And why? Also als Kind ist man gar nicht interessiert, aber warum habe ich mich jetzt interessiert? Because I stumbled on something that is not good. Also ich bin über was gestolpert, was nicht gut ist. I had heard from my mother, here they are both, I heard from my mother the elder, that she was a counselor to the nobility. Also meine Mutter, die ältere, war eine Ratgeberin für den Adel. The former leading families all had been of the western nobility, except on the father side, that was eastern nobility. And she had some role models to tell me about, and that was this lady, and I heard quite a lot about her, and she told me as a storyteller about this story. And she had quite something. She was the first daughter of the leading nobility born, and she had quite something to work on. Also das war schon einiges, was man dann aufarbeiten musste. Man hat nicht einfach die Titel bekommen. Und das war so die Lieblingsprinzessin. And I thought, not again about her. And then she left me and I could ask something else. Also wenn ich dann sagte, ach nicht schon wieder von der, dann hat sie mich in Ruhe gelassen. Also zum Beispiel, wenn sie mich ins Bett gebracht hat, for example, when she had put me to sleep, as a child, not to sleep, also jetzt nicht eingeschläfert. Also als Kind, wenn sie mich zum Schlafen hat bringen wollen, also mir eine gute Nachtgeschichte erzählte, not all the time, but it then, even when I was 10 years, 11, 12 years old, she went to my living small room, 2.5 meter, and then the ceiling was not even, also in a very small window and artificial light, but if those from other countries hear about it, they say, oh, this is very good, and I complied with that. Also hier kann ich mich auch nicht beklagen, wenn das aus anderen Ländern, I had seen people living in dumpsters. Man hat mich da so auf Kurztrips, und this was most likely to raise me as a diplomat. Also sehr wahrscheinlich hatte meine Mutter vor, mich zum Diplomaten zu erziehen. But the situation in Germany is not easy. There is still the aftermath of World War II. War was not there, and the system the space my father was on. He was in the security of some kind. Like it is written in Ubique Terrarum. And he had been himself maybe just. This is Breslau and Lodz in Poland, but they both had a German-speaking community. Breslau, of course, yes, they had Polish as well. It was something where the languages were both present. Officially, this is Los Angeles. I don't know where the town is not there. I think there's Los Angeles. I hope in California. He was the author or the head of a writing. He was interested. No, series of the also drei Fragezeichen, ist ja von Hitchcock und ich weiß nicht genau, so eine Art Verleger, Koordinator für Autoren. Ja, der hat ja auch viele Horrorfilme und so weiter gemacht. Aber da sind die an ihn herangetreten und der hat es in Amerika spielen lassen, weil hier hätte man das wahrscheinlich nicht aus der Hand genommen wegen der Nachkriegsfolgen. It really had been that the human rights had been broken to such extent, and this was of course even with shivers, or not even, of course with shivers, translated to me as devil's work. Also hier ist ganz eindeutig das sogenannte Dritte Reich als Teufelswerk übersetzt worden. Und deswegen wohl hatte man dann, als man diesen Kinderromane Versuch gestartet hatte, über die drei Fragezeichen, also das waren dann so die Kinder von den Detektiven. Die Detektive, ich nenne sie mal so, also die Spurensucher oder die Ermittler, die waren, the detectives had been both in the police work, or in the military work, or in the diplomatic corps. And Ubique Terrarum is not 100% real. It is for the novel environment transformed a little bit, and this as well were not done by young children. My father, he was older than the others, but he was looking very young because he was small, and he had this profession because the tribe system, that was not officially a tribe anymore, that was or had come out of a travelsman system, traveling on land and sea. Also die Familie meines Vaters, and this is not for security reasons put in the papers as father, because no one knew how this would come out. He was still expected. My mother was praying every day that he could come back safe and sound, and I believed it for quite a time, till then in the 90s. Here she is with the friends of my father, and the most interesting, she said he tested her. He was in disguise as an old man, and he said to her, please visit a meeting of my friends. And then he, interestingly enough, was someone talking to my mother, and she did not recognize him. She was not even believing it fully. When she said it to me, she said he tested her. Also das war wirklich so ein Umfeld, dass meine Mutter, also die Freunde kennenlernen sollte. Denn da gab es bei einigen Vorbehalte, aber er wollte sie eben testen. Und da meine Mutter einen Erzieher gehabt hatte, über den sie diese Gruppe kannte, die sonst, ja, wie man sieht, ja, schon ein eigenes Förderungssystem hatten, das, wenn ich davon hörte, dann schon dachte, gut erzogene Kinder, aber anstrengend. Das ist jetzt nicht der Grund, aber sie waren eben auch nicht für jeden offen. Das darf man ja auch nicht vergessen. Und meine Mutter ist dann da eingeführt worden, indem sie mal selbst versuchen sollte. Und mein Vater hat auch beobachtet, wie meine Mutter jetzt aufgenommen würde. Denn das war nicht so, dass das nur von außen abgeschlossen war, dass das keiner machen wollte, dort teilnehmen, sondern es war auch von innen nicht für jeden zugänglich. And this is something maybe I tell you later about a little bit, that my father was special, also er war schon sehr besonders. And this is a companion of my mother, and she was with her for unknown reasons, also das wurde mir nicht erklärt. Das war schon etwas, ich dachte, das hat damit zu tun, weil das ist ein Turnverein, das geht hier noch weiter. Und das sind eben die Kriegsversehrten hier vorne. Und ja, hier gibt es auch noch einiges zu erzählen, aber this is again to try to gain understanding. Also ich möchte etwas Verständnis bekommen, because it is something not interesting for everyone, but this is especially that an intercultural mission work, not from the church, but a mission work because of the want to have a togetherness. Also das hier ist kein Missionswerk jetzt von der Kirche, aber man wollte ein gemeinsames schaffen, ein Zusammengehen oder ein Zusammenstehen. And my own bring up school, as I said, and then I was looking for a profession. This was child, and others cared because my father wasn't there, and they knew it, but they did not tell much about it. Maybe being sensible and not wanting to come too close. Also andere haben sich da um mich gekümmert. Father was not there. Of course, there was a raising father, but this was a distance away. I was not interested how it went, because we traveled, me as a child, being taken on a hand and then sleeping in a car, in a train, or else. I think there had been a train in between. But I was not traveling across borders, because for me there were no borders. It was being taken with someone else. Also das ist schon wichtig zu wissen, und gefühlsmäßig war ich da einfach nur dabei. I called them, I don't know exactly if I even said, I did not talk much. Maybe they were like uncles with daycare fathers maybe. Also Tagesväter sagt man ja auch. Oder mothers. And now when I'm not having this medicine and I'm trying to bring me into focus, because seeing those pictures, there was a message. Why am I in this U-turn? Warum bin ich in der Sackgasse? I did not understand, but I knew there was secrecy about things, and she said, maybe you can find out. And now I'm looking into my memories, and I get some negative recognition. Also ich bekomme irgendwie negative Erkenntnis, dass da was ist. And then looking for a profession. This was high school diploma. I had quite some problems, but those were, I thought so, because of the differences in being raised up. Also hier gab es schon Konflikte. Da gab es schon Konflikte, ja. I was raised in the spirit of doing that was right. Also ich bin erzogen worden, das zu tun, was richtig ist. The mummy, also meine Mama, a school teacher. My mother, they were both mothers without, also ohne Unterschiede, waren beide Mütter, das habe ich auch nicht hinterfragt. For the outside world, she was Oma, and the other Mama. But I knew better don't tell too much. So my father was my grandfather, but he was father, I knew that. And I was a little bit mixed. I thought others knew that as well, those who were in office, for example. And they did, but then they didn't. Also es war ein bisschen durcheinander. Ich habe gedacht, die anderen wissen das auch. Das wurde auch schon mal bestätigt. Ja, das wissen wir ja. Aber dann auch wieder nicht. Also einige wussten, andere nicht. Und es war nicht wichtig, weil erstmal ist es nicht wichtig. But now I understand there had been something I didn't know. Those where I had been, I think the United States are important because of their golden rule, do to others as you would have them do to you. Also hier gab es eine ethische Erziehung und die goldene Regel lautet, tu anderen, was du selbst willst, dass sie dir tun. And that was mostly common sense in America, in the United States of America. I hope in Canada as well. But I heard it mostly in the pedagogical field, in the schools, of course, those are not representative. Ich weiß ja nicht, wenn Schulen nicht war, but I hope it is everywhere. Das weiß natürlich nicht. This was the time when she started to say, this is the most important. Do not lie to me, otherwise you will lose me. And I can remember being shocked. Also ich kann mir noch erinnern, dass mich das schockiert hatte. Wird sie das wirklich machen? Sie sagte zwar, sie würde mich nicht umbringen, aber dann eben würde ich sie verlieren. Aber ich war mir nicht ganz sicher, ob sie mir nicht doch was antun würde. Also das, aber ich kann mich nicht erinnern, dass ich geschlagen worden bin. Also jetzt doch so, aber nicht jetzt so, dass, wie ich schon mal gesehen hatte, dass man grün und blau war, das nicht. I cannot remember being hit. So when I said I did not know if she could do something to me, if I would lie to her, and that means I saw the seriousness when she said it to me. I knew she hated being tricked. But she said, I will ask you 1 or 2 or 3 times, and do not say you know if you don't, so better you say, I'm not sure, or please wait, or help me to find out. Also wir hatten ja so Abmachungen. Also wenn ich also nicht wusste, musste ich es auch nicht sagen. I'm glad that I could ask what I wanted. So, also ich hatte keine Sprechverbote. Wenn ich etwas nicht wusste, dann konnte ich auch sagen. But we worked, finding out. And I was from the earliest days on put on the field by her as a detective. Also ich bin schon ganz früh auch als Detektiv eingesetzt worden. She gave me tasks. Not this as... Yes, it started a little bit later. She said there is no one else. Maybe he can tell you this and that, and you can say to me if that is understandable. And then she said, you understand that? I can remember it was the decision to help someone, to connect people together, also irgendwie die Mäzen mit den Sponsoring-Empfängern zusammenzubringen. And I understood that was my mother, the elder, and 2 or 3 in America, and they wanted to invest in movies to build a family character, for example. Also daran kann ich mich erinnern. Und das sind dann so beachtliche Filme, die dann auch nach Deutschland kamen. And now I'd like to find out if there's some traces left. Because if I tell that, this is ridiculous. Also wenn ich das erzähle, ist natürlich lächerlich, weil das kann jeder behaupten. Aber ich weiß das und ich suche nach Spuren. But how can someone find out? She had a telephone with a modem, and this was like a hearing device. Also sie hatte sowas harmloses wie so ein Hörgerät, das hat wie ein Modem funktioniert. Da hatten sie Kontakte. Ich möchte das einfach rauskriegen, because I'm not only laughed at, and this was something, an eye-opener. I understood. She did that. Yes, she explained to me how she did that, how she was exercising, and how she had been dressed. And then I saw that, and the description was different. I knew she had been in a group that had bodyguarding as one of their tasks as well. And they were disguised as those they were protecting. Also ich wusste schon, dass sie in einer Gruppe war, die auch Adlige geschützt hatten. Aber it is too much. But I understand, it must have been, because abroad sometimes I thought they mistake something. It was abroad, it was much different, and it stopped then when I went to school. Then it was sometimes in holidays, but before it was quite often. And I was missing other children at my age. And why did they do it? Also warum hat man das so gemacht? And I can remember my mother said, also my mummy, she said, I do not want you to be a wonder child. Also ich will nicht, dass du ein Wunderkind wirst. She was strictly against it. And that must have been a reason as well. In the Eastern tribes, this is Eastern, there had been the marrying by character for centuries. Also hier im Osten, da wurden wirklich nach Charaktereigenschaften schon lange Ehen geschlossen, für Jahrhunderte. They were traveling in small groups, in big families, also sie sind in einer Sippe gereist, und da hatte man schon lange hatte man da the travel partner for security reasons. They had only the small family for their protection. And then they had some wagons, not only one. But it was dangerous. There were fights on the road, also es gab Straßenkämpfe, und die wussten, sie überleben nur, wenn sie kluge Frauen heiraten. And that was done for centuries. But it was the same in the Western system in Prussia and in Hessen. da waren Vernunftehen. There had been marriages by matchmakers. And I think that she was an exception inside of the system and then brought inside of civil families. Also das, she had been saying that they gave me that family. She had been in China with a guest family. And that was sad. Took it too much serious. Think though, no, must be there. It's not written down. Also sie hatte Ausbildung. And she said to me, I want you to be at the places, but it was too short, but better than nothing. Also ich sollte eigentlich da sein, wo sie auch mal gewesen war, aber das war viel zu kurz. Aber besser als gar nichts. For cultural understanding. This was my raising up. Without leaving the own standpoint. Also natürlich ohne den eigenen Standpunkt zu verlieren. But for that reason I had already seen the black and the Eskimos and Indians and in between. The big ones, the small ones. And she once had said, your father was very small, maybe you will not grow in the height that is normally in the population. Also sie hatte mal gesagt, vielleicht wirst du nicht so groß werden, wie das normal ist in der Größe, in der Gesellschaft. But I was given much yogurt. Maybe because of that I'm not smaller. I was very lad, very narrow. I was very much. And this was very interesting. She said they had in the tribe system very small families, nearly like the Pygmies. Also fast wie die Pygmäen gab es ganz kleine. Und my father was not the smallest, but he was rather small, little in appearance. Also äußerlich war er ziemlich klein. Then I want to say something else, that no misunderstanding is rising and hardening. Also es sollte nicht verfestigen, dass Mist jetzt gedacht wird, also dass Falsches gedacht wird. There had been the tribe system with, I don't know how many leaders, I don't know. Some were then killed in combat, but this is Pauline and Karl, and when he came to the Western ethical understanding, and I deliberately say it this way, because it was a prerequisite from the center of the, it had not been of the world, but of the world that was governing merchandise and so on. Also es gab ja schon die Börse und das Zentrum hat es zur Bedingung gemacht, dass eine ethische Hinkehr zum westlichen Verständnis. There had been of course a change of heart as well, I know that, but for the others it was more interesting that they had been fully supporting the Western style of merchandise and diplomacy, not shooting in the ceiling, for example. In the earlier days it had been done that way, but they had new regulations, and it was a prerequisite to carry that, and carry that very well. Also das war so die Voraussetzung, das wirklich mitzutragen, das westliche System. And Pauline then was the married wife from the time on of the conversion. And this was, they had been trained in legal contracts, so they were very well into contracting. So it was then his wife, and the others were paid off. There had been some guest households, and sometimes before his conversion, maybe even after a little bit, I don't know exactly, the householders were playing wives. Because when they were traveling the world, it was mostly alone, and the best security is to be in disguise. I don't know if they do it that way today, because my mother was not inside from maybe the 20s on, from 1920. There was somehow, or 1925, then it stopped. And I think Pauline and Karl had been tribes leaders. Then there was my father, and he was not acting on the front line. They had generals or Field-Marshals, also es gab also wie viele weiß ich nicht, wahrscheinlich noch viel mehr. Die waren mehr im Hintergrund, das sind Leaders, ja. And when I once said, there had been this Pferd, nee, wie hieß er noch, Bock, kann das sein? This was a character he could take over from time to time. If they had the figure or the physical appearance as one of them. I don't know if Pauline was as well, I can't remember, but possibly from time to time being there as well. Also ich weiß natürlich nicht, ob Pauline auch mit auf Reisen gegangen ist, aber sie soll auch dabei gewesen sein, von Zeit zu Zeit. Also das Stammessystem war so: Field-Marshals. Ich weiß nicht, wie man es genau schreibt. I don't know if this is, also Marschall, wahrscheinlich. Also Feldmarschall. Das ist so die Rolle gewesen, und deswegen kann man nicht sagen, dass Bock die Personalie ist. It is not right, according to my knowledge. Or not right. Not fully right, as in Wikipedia. Because there it is written as being one character. And there is of course mixing up. I can remember there had been someone at the doorstep, and I did not even know back then if I were allowed to say anything. I'd rather say nothing then, aber ich wusste auch nicht viel. But I did not know very much. Also ich wusste nicht viel, aber ich bin da mal gefragt worden, because there had been the handwritings of letters and orders, and they were different from different people. And they could not explain it back then in the 80s or 70s. Also ich bin nochmal gefragt worden, weil zum Beispiel diese Personalie, Feder auf Bock oder von Bock, this, and there might have been another field marshal, but maybe not all had been the statue, with the statue of the physical appearance, that someone else could go there if there had been problems, or to test the environment. Also das ist so eine Art gewesen, ich weiß nicht, ob das heute noch Militär ist, aber dann hatten sie schon mal, oder sie waren in die Rolle geschlüpft. In German that is exactly how it was described. In die Rolle schlüpfen. Schlüpfen, that is to slip in the role or character. This was for testing or emergency help. But I hadn't do that. Also ich hatte das nicht getan, and I didn't wanted to. My mother was warning because there had been problems. My father was not coming back from the war, and there had been tension because there had been allegations. Oh, sorry. There had been, there's me with my mommy, there had been, she's my mother as well, and most thought she was, and she was even signing as mother. In the first year, I think she was signing as well, so it was a little bit mixing up those pedagogical leaderships. Also das waren ja irgendwie Erziehungsberechtigungen, die waren also nicht ganz eindeutig. Für mich, I knew mother one, mother two, she had to say more than the other, because she was older, and being the mother of her as well. Also es ist wirklich so, dass man hier wissen muss, es gab Probleme. There had been allegations, and those were heavy and serious. My mother said some were false. Not by looking into it, but because he couldn't have been there. He was with her traveling in other places. Also einige Anschuldigungen waren natürlich ganz falsch, weil meine Mutter war mit ihm auf einer Reise, zum Beispiel Hochzeitsreise und so. Und dann soll er irgendwo gewesen sein und man wollte ihm etwas in die Schuhe schieben. They wanted to put something for him to pay it. Also das ist wirklich so gewesen. Man wollte irgendetwas ihm in die Schuhe schieben, damit or that others were not to be blamed. Oder dass andere nicht beschuldigt werden konnten. And the most simplest thing to understand why he couldn't have been there, also die einfachste Sache, das zu verstehen, warum ich nicht da sein konnte, this is a time axis, and this is 1900, and this is not precise, it is estimated. KARL, maybe, I once heard the date, 1908, also 1908. KARL, he had a head wound. And then he had enemies at home, and everywhere where he was, or had been. I knew that from storytelling, and so I was never wanting, if I had not been forced, to go into their shoes, or in their shoes, in their places. Also ich hätte nie eine Nachfolge haben wollen, weil viel zu gefährlich. There had been the wars in America, in Europe, and so on. But KARL was developing a head wound infection. And this I have to write in red, because it was very serious infection. I could tell more about it, but this is important enough. It had been an infection, very serious, very serious. Very serious. And he was behaving very strange. And this may be from then on. First he was taken care or being waited for, also so wie so, ja, man muss halt bei ihm sein, bei Pauline, but then by so he was governing, doing administration from the back office, so to speak. Deswegen hatte Fritz dann die Administration, als Pauline nicht mal alleine klar kam, von zu Hause aus gemacht. I think, and of course, I don't know exactly when, he once slipped in the role and said goodbye, because the other was not doing it as being ordered. Also hier war natürlich das schwierig, weil der Staat, it was state authority, not, it was, I don't know, maybe from 1971, from 1871. There's the Reichsgründung, and from then on that was private. 1871, private. And then, I don't know if it had been before the Russian war, or the part that was directing against the Eastern Front. Poland, Russia, Ukraine and so on. No, Ukraine, Russia. Ukraine had been part of Russia. Also als dann das war der UdSSR, weiß nicht genau. Also das war der Russlandfeldzug. Und davor, he must have been slipping, F.J.U, slipping for a short time in the role of, I think it was him, I don't know exactly, it could be someone else. He slipped inside of it and said, goodbye, this is not for me, I'm retiring. He was old enough to retire, but he was against the participation because he knew this was his knowledge that this would go wrong. Also mein Vater war gegen diesen Russlandfeldzug, auch weil er wusste, dass das gar nicht geht. Also wie das wahrscheinlich ausgehen wird, da wird so viel zerstört. And I'd like to know, he was not regarded very well, because he had a different style. They were contractors, also sie waren Vertragsarbeiter for the German Reich, also es war privat. And they were not bribed, they were paid, it was the custom. Also da steht fälschlich auf Wikipedia, sie wären betrogen, oder sie würden sich bestechen lassen. This was not right. Some of them had not been even German citizens, maybe Bohemian or something else. Und deswegen, das muss man wissen. Man muss wissen, das ist eine besondere Situation. Und er hatte die Rolle ausgeschaltet. Vor dem Russlandfeldzug. And maybe the poor man who was doing it against the decision, he was not getting the order, or he was being forced to prolong it. Also ich weiß nicht, wie das weil der ist noch jemand als dann deutscher General, also nicht mehr aus dem Stamm. Warum, weiß ich nicht. Da war natürlich die Wehrmacht, das war kein Pappenstiel. Wenn es Befehle gab, musste man dann eben dem Heeresführer folgen. Aber es ist wichtig, dass ausgeschaltet worden ist, because someone came at the door, and he was trying to investigate. And we were ordered not to give answers if something was asked about the so-called grandfather. Und ich muss ganz ehrlich sagen, my mother answered if she was asked. But they tried to do it behind her back, and even trying to trick me, a young child. I had been not this age, but maybe they asked me again and again, and this was not done openly. But uncles after church, or so-called uncles in church, the elder men were called uncles, maybe you have that as well, or you know that, and the older women, aunts. And then someone came and asked me questions, and this was of course a private investigation as well. I don't know, maybe this is something strange. But the most interesting thing is, Fritz had to be with Karl. Fritz and Karl. You know what that is? That is even gone to to the outside world as the known comic Father and Son. Also Vater und Sohn, da gibt es ja diesen bekannten Comic. And this I will explain in a later video. We have now 1 hour. I hope this recording has succeeded. Ich hoffe, dass diese Aufnahme funktioniert hat. And I'm doing it as I do it every day, thinking it over not by force, but by reflecting it to come to the real thing. It is something like a detective does it, and I have those photographs to remember me that there had been expectations. They both, they went along with some conflict, because there had been expectations to the raising father he could not meet. And this was a difficult environment after World War II. And then there is a new population having come in the country, and those cannot understand why this is a problematic situation. The conflict inside of the Wehrmacht, and then after the war, the persecution of those who had done wrong against the law, and they try to find out, and he never was, and I think it could have been the case that he did something wrong as well, but it wasn't, I think, and I stand to this point. I stand my ground, what this is concerned. Also ich bleib dabei, da ist jetzt nichts vorzuwerfen. He was poor because Karl paid off his men, also hat seine Männer bezahlt, but he wasn't given the money, he gave them. Also das war ja Vertragsarbeit. Die Einigungskriege, die haben Geld gekostet. Karl hatte vorfinanziert. Und dann gab es Gründe, dass der Staat oder die Staaten, es gab ja doch schon Bundesstaaten, dass sie gar nichts hätten, nichts in der Kasse. Und ich weiß nicht, was daraus geworden ist, das weiß ich nicht. Because it was not my business as a child. Also bis ungefähr 2009, ja sehr genau, war das nicht meine Sache. Da durfte ich mich auch nicht einmischen. Die Finanzen, das machen die Eltern alleine, das geht mich nichts an, deswegen weiß ich das nicht. Aber hier ist ja nichts hingekommen, sonst hätten wir ja nicht gearbeitet oder arbeiten müssen. Im Garten Kartoffeln ausbuddeln und Äpfel pflücken, Unkraut jäten. Das haben wir nicht gerne gemacht, das war einfach notwendig. Oder sich selbst Hosen nähen. Ich habe auch schon mal in der Nähmaschine gesessen, das ist alles in Ordnung. Aber nicht, wenn man das machen muss. It is of course interesting to sew your own clothing, but it's no fun if you have to do it, and it's no fun to grow potatoes and pick berries and apples. If it is a necessity. It was no hobby, it was a necessity. We did that because we were relatively. Und this is more than in the third world country, of course. Hatten wir mehr als in der dritten Welt. And a rusty car and everything with percentages. Was auch nichts Ungewöhnliches, also kennen andere auch. Nur nicht, dass man denkt, hier wäre irgendwie Geld. Karl paid off his man from his own and then he was poor. Of course, natürlich. Also wenn man ja dann seine Leute bezahlt, ich weiß nicht, wie viele Tausend das gewesen sind, dann haben die vielleicht noch geklagt, sie hätten nicht genug bekommen, aber waren natürlich arm und das müsste dann von 1900 an so gewesen sein. And then 1938, ich weiß nicht genau, ob das dann schon war oder ob das vielleicht auch erst 41, weiß ich nicht, because he had been on a travel till maybe then he went there in the Corps, in the group of the generals and field-marshals, and he slipped into a role, into character, and said, this is now the end, I cannot follow you any longer. Also, das könnte er gewesen sein. And then he had to earn money because they hadn't none. And there he was a radio, reading news, natürlich auf Deutsch, aber auch vielleicht auch Englisch, weiß nicht, and television in disguise to protect. Also als dann Attentate angedroht worden sind, hat er auch Politiker geschützt. There had been it had been their character to be impartial against the reigning parties. It was the time when the breaking of human rights was likely. He said, I have to obey God rather than men. And then he started his resistance work. He was not against the German interests. He had been German because from the 17th century on, or the 18th, they had taken the Austrian and then the German part, or party. Also das ist eindeutig eine Entscheidung für die westliche Seite gewesen. Also die österreichische, also Österreich-Ungarn und also wahrscheinlich da Böhmen. Und dann Karl wahrscheinlich auch eher in Böhmen. Aber Fritz war dann nach Breslau gezogen, hatte dann die Seite, also die waren Deutsche, haben nicht gegen deutsche Interessen verstoßen. Aber dann hat es den Punkt gegeben, wo sie die Menschenrechtsverletzungen geahnt hatten. Da war dann der Slogan, man muss Gott mehr gehorchen als die Menschen, also die Menschenrechte mehr achten, als den sogenannten Führerbefehl zum Beispiel. Und das war dann lebensgefährlich. And it was illegal. You cannot resist in wartime and do it legally. But I don't know how much was accepted afterward. Also ich weiß nicht, wie viel nach dem Krieg akzeptiert worden ist. Deswegen ist, weil das aber trotzdem illegal gewesen ist, hat man vielleicht auch nicht nachgeforscht. Also mich hat das schon interessiert. Meine Mutter hat es erzählt. Und man hat ihr geraten, das nicht zu erzählen, weil es hätte viele, viele Feinde gegeben. Und jetzt ist aber die Zeit, wo man das vielleicht sagen kann, weil ich denke nicht, dass ich jetzt dafür angegangen werde. Ich war ja nicht selbst dabei. Ich weiß nicht, wie der Widerstand ausgesehen hat. Meine Mutter sagte, es sollte friedlich sein. This is the workplace I have. Also es sollte friedlich sein, nach dem, was sie wollten. Das wollten sie, dass es friedlich getan würde. Das war die Zeit, wo ich leider mehr geschlafen als wach gewesen bin, weil ich muss ja Nachtdienst leisten und war ganz dermaßen müde, dass ich da wirklich auch solche Sachen jetzt nicht habe überlegen können. Und das hier ist vielleicht etwas, was mich mehr angeht, als ich bisher wusste. Ich wusste nur, das ist eine interessante Prinzessin. Dass die Prinzessin interessant ist, das wusste ich. Mehr bisher nicht. Das ist alles alle Spekulation. It is speculation in the mode or on the level of the three investigators. So please don't tell I would claim to be someone. It could be the case. But then I come to problems. Why was my mother wanting to play the character of a princess? I had movies. I had quite a lot of movies. When I had been on short trips, it had been much with some, I don't know how Sherlock maybe. Holmes it had been, and there had been Miss Marple, and I was playing little characters, little roles. Miss Marple, and I had been in Kalle Blomqvist. I don't know if that movie was put to the air, but I thought it was a movie play, But my mother said maybe they test you as well for other later, for other possible professions. Aber ich weiß das eben nicht. Because then it was not possible. Then the reunification. Dann gab es die Wiedervereinigung. Die Wiedervereinigung. Und die war so teuer, but now I come to the conclusion, were those options? Man kann ja freiwillig vom Staat wie eine Belohnung für diese beachtliche Leistung für Menschenrechte, das muss anerkannt gewesen sein im Ausland. Abroad in other countries, it must have been acknowledged and renowned that there had been resistance in Breslau by my parents, Fritz and Else. And there had been in a church, in a Protestant church, but having been visitors with the community of the Stork. Visitors, and I don't say what, not that I do not want to, also es war wahrscheinlich immer noch so, dass man damit Leute abschreckt, wenn man jetzt was sagt, weil da Vorurteile gibt. Because of pre-taken positions thinking about this group, Stork. This was the name of the congregation. And there was a synagogue. Aber es ist immer noch so, dass es damals und heute wahrscheinlich immer noch, because I heard some things, I don't know why that was said. I said, in Breslau it wasn't that way. If you have a negative attitude, I don't know why that is. Also ich musste mich da mal verteidigen, also warum du so die schlechte Einstellung gegenüber diesen Arten von Gemeinschaften hast, das weiß ich nicht. Also in Breslau war das nicht so, habe ich nur gesagt. And I can remember the expression of my mother, they didn't know the Breslau friends, she said. She didn't know the Breslau friends. She said, you could call them Großvaters friends. And I said, no. Grandfather, he wasn't all that old. Not all the days of his life. He was a young man. And he was quite a fighter. So I did not want to call him grandfather. It was for the outside world. For me, he was my biggest role model. Thank you very much, and see you next time.